Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, the UN General Assembly adopts resolution calling for immediate, sustained humanitarian truce in Gaza. Israel expands ground operations in Gaza as airstrikes intensify. India creates history, crosses 100 medals at Asian Para Games in record-breaking campaign. The United Nations General Assembly has passed a resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian truce between Israel and Hamas and demanding aid access to Gaza. A total of 120 countries voted in favor of the resolution. 14 countries voted against, including Israel and the United States, while 45 others abstained. The resolution also demands all parties comply with international humanitarian law and continuous, sufficient and unhindered provision of life-saving supplies and services for the civilians trapped inside the enclave. It also calls for immediate and unconditional release of all civilians held captive, as well as demanding their safety, well-being and humane treatment in compliance with international law. The resolution stresses on the need to urgently establish a mechanism to ensure the protection of the Palestinian civilian population and the protection of United Nations and all humanitarian facilities, as well as to ensure the unhindered movement of aid convoys. US has reiterated that Israel has the right to defend itself. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, US Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said that the international humanitarian law must be respected throughout Gaza and the region by all the actors.
The United States has made clear in both public and private conversations that as Israel exercises its right and indeed its responsibility to defend its people against the terrorist group, it must do so in line with the rules of war. There are no law-free zones in war. International humanitarian law must be respected throughout Gaza and the region by all actors.
Deputy Permanent Representative of India at the United Nations, Ambassador Yojana Patel, delivered the explanation of India's vote at the 10th UNGA Emergency Special Session on Friday. She stressed the Assembly to adopt a zero-tolerance approach to terrorism.
India is deeply concerned at the deteriorating security situation and astounding loss of civilian lives in the ongoing conflict. The escalation of hostilities in the region will only exacerbate the humanitarian crisis. It is necessary for all parties to display the utmost responsibility. India has always supported a negotiated two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine issue, leading to the establishment of a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine, living within secure and recognized borders, side by side in peace with Israel. For this, we urge the parties to de-escalate, eschew violence, and work towards creating conditions for an early resumption of direct peace negotiations.
Meanwhile, explosions were seen from southern Israeli skyline on Friday after Israel said that it was stepping up ground operations in Gaza. Images showed explosions lighting up the night sky and balls of fire and smoke rising above Gaza City, while flares were seen east of Khan Yunis on the southern Gaza Strip. Earlier on Friday, Israeli forces conducted a second ground raid in as many days into the Palestinian enclave, striking the outskirts of Gaza City. The United States and Arab countries have urged Israel to delay the operation in Gaza, which could multiply the number of civilian casualties in the densely populated coastal strip and might ignite a wider conflict. Israel said that its ground forces were expanding their activity in Gaza on Friday night amid heavy bombardment of the enclave by its air force, which cut off internet and phone services. Israel's chief military spokesperson told media that the army is prepared on all fronts to preserve Israel's security. Israel has warned people in Gaza to move to the south region.
In the last hours, we intensified the attacks in Gaza. The Air Force was conducting extensive strikes on tunnels and other terrorists' infrastructure. In addition to the attacks carried out in the last few days, ground forces are expanding their operations tonight. The military is operating powerfully on all dimensions in order to achieve the goals of the war.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has appealed for the monitoring of aid deliveries to the Gaza Strip to be adjusted to allow many more trucks to enter Gaza without delay. The UN chief has welcomed the growing global consensus for a humanitarian pause in the conflict and repeated his call for a humanitarian ceasefire.
The humanitarian system in Gaza is facing a total collapse with unimaginable consequences for more than 2 million civilians. As the bombing intensifies, needs are growing ever more critical and colossal. The verification system for the movement of goods through Rafah crossing must be adjusted to allow for more trucks to enter Gaza without delay. We must meet the expectations and the core needs of civilians in Gaza. Life-saving humanitarian aid, food, water, medicine, fuel must be allowed to reach all civilians swiftly, safely, and at scale. Without a fundamental change, the people of Gaza will face an unprecedented avalanche of human suffering. Everyone must assume their responsibilities. This is a moment of truth. History will judge us.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, in a call with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, underscored the importance of protecting civilians during operations in Gaza. Now, this was the second call between the two leaders in 2 days. Earlier on Thursday, the U.S. Defense Secretary discussed with his Israeli counterpart the need to facilitate humanitarian aid into Gaza and to ensure the protection of civilians. Analysts have said that the strikes that the United States carried out on Iranian targets are a signal to Tehran that the Biden administration does not want the Gaza conflict to spread regionally. The U.S. military carried out strikes against 2 facilities in eastern Syria in response to a spate of attacks against U.S. forces in both Iraq and Syria. An analyst, Aaron Steen, said that U.S. and coalition troops have been attacked in Iraq and in Syria. This allowed Iran to show that it is doing something to show its opposition to Israel's actions and U.S. support for Israel without risking a wider conflict.
The concern is with horizontal escalation, i.e. that in response to the Israeli incursions, the airstrikes that are taking place, the Iranians have been telling everybody overtly and loudly that they will proliferate, they will escalate if necessary. And again, going back to those rules, one of the ways that you can escalate without necessarily risking getting your teeth kicked in, if you're the Iranian leadership, is by doing they're harassment attacks, small indirect fire, but for the troops at the other end, they still are not pleasant.
Meanwhile, ahead of the UNGA vote on a resolution, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar discussed the Israel-Hamas war situation with his Omani counterpart, Badr al-Busaidi. The two leaders discussed bilateral relations and exchanged views on the crisis in West Asia. Al-Busaidi emphasized in the talks on the critical need for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and a good flow of humanitarian aid. The Indian minister had earlier spoken to his Saudi Arabia and UAE counterparts. European Union leaders have wrapped up their summit where they called for civilians in Gaza to be protected and vowed to continue supporting Ukraine. Although they agreed on a joint declaration, officials now face weeks of complex negotiations over the bloc's long-term budget and how to source funds for longer-term commitments to Kyiv. Let's get this report from our correspondent from Brussels.
The situation in the Middle East may have been top of the agenda, but it was by no means the only important issue. EU diplomats made clear that nothing would distract the bloc from supporting Ukraine. most member states weren't too bothered by Slovakia's new Prime Minister saying his country would stop sending weapons to Ukraine. One EU diplomat told me that the announcement doesn't matter because Slovakia has already sent everything it had. And more money will be sent from the EU to Ukraine. Some of this cash will come from profits made from the more than $200 billion in Russian assets seized by the European Union. Beyond the war in the Middle East and the war on the EU's doorstep, the 27 also got to work on resolving two of its most contentious disputes. The first one was a brief discussion on migration. The second, a robust debate on topping up the EU's long-term budget. Both of these tricky topics remained unresolved and will be tackled again in December at the next EU Council meeting. Alex Kadia in Brussels reporting for DD India.
The US and China are at odds over many global issues, but in a sign of improving diplomacy, President Biden did meet China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Washington on Friday. But missing from the readouts was any confirmation that China's President Xi Jinping would attend APEC in San Francisco. Caroline Malone gets us the details from Washington.
Ahead of his meeting with the US Secretary of State Blinken, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the two nations need to have dialogue to reduce misunderstanding and seek more stable relations, but that he's hopeful that the talks will be constructive. Wang is also due to meet National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Friday. There's also a chance for direct talks with President Biden. The US and China have been ramping up diplomacy in recent months after years of testy relations. There was the fallout over trade tariffs, then a Chinese spy balloon over the US that was shot down, leading to a souring in relations. But in recent months, US officials have visited Beijing, and now Chinese officials are in the US. If it all goes well, it could lead to a visit from Chinese President Xi Jinping, who may attend the APEC Leaders Summit in San Francisco next month. And there could be a possible Biden-Xi meeting on the sidelines. Caroline Malone, Washington for DD India.
And up next, we get you other stories related to the Israel-Hamas conflict that are making it to the headlines. Amid the ongoing airstrikes in Gaza that have left thousands dead and injured, a pregnant woman gave birth to a baby girl after she was taken out of the rubble following an Israeli airstrike. The child was delivered by neonatal resuscitation. Unfortunately, the mother did not survive, but the baby did. As per the doctors, the child's condition is from average to good. However, the hospital is at the risk of power cut. And once that happens, the incubators will be suspended and all babies will be in danger. The Israeli-American Council has set up a 222-seat empty Shabbat tables in the heart of Times Square, New York, representing the hostages held captive by Hamas in Gaza. The tables have a sign reading, "Bring them home now." The installation is a call for awareness and immediate action towards their release. The internationally known 12 feet tall Little Amal, a 10-year-old Syrian refugee girl's puppet, has been deployed at the US-Mexican border. Amal, meaning hope in Arabic, visited the migrant families waiting for their chance to cross the border and finish their dangerous journey. The giant puppet will participate in events on both the sides of the border until November 6th. Up next, we're heading with a short break, but still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Suspected gunman wanted in Maine shooting found dead. X launches 2 new subscription plans. And striking Hollywood actors to hold next round of talks with studios today.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers.
Watch Changemakers on DD India.
Well, Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live and I'm Preeti. Let's continue getting you more international updates. The man suspected of killing 18 people and wounding 13 in a shooting rampage in Lewiston in Maine was found dead on Friday. With this, a 48-hour manhunt ended that followed the most lethal episode of gun violence in the state's history. The 40-year-old suspect, Robert R. Card, was found dead from self-inflicted gunshot wound. According to the law enforcement officials, the suspect had a history of mental illness and was committed to a psychiatric facility for 2 weeks during the summer of 2023, after which he was released. Maine Governor Janet Mills, in a news conference, has confirmed that the Maine shooting suspect has died. She thanked the officers from various agencies involved in the search operations.
He is dead. I've called President Biden to inform him about this news. Like many people, I'm breathing a sigh of relief tonight, knowing that Robert Card is no longer a threat to anyone. I know there are some people, and many people, who share that sentiment, but I also know that his death may not bring solace to many. But now is a time to heal.
Following Maine mass shootings, Democratic Representative Jared Golden said that he was changing his stance on gun legislation and would now support banning the assault weapons. The Marine Corps veteran was one of the only 5 Democratic representatives to oppose a planned ban on assault-style weapons that was passed by the House of Representatives in 2022.
Among many other misjudgments, I have opposed efforts to ban deadly weapons of war like the assault rifle used to carry out this crime. The time has now come for me to take responsibility for this failure, which is why I now call on the United States Congress to ban assault rifles like the one used by the sick perpetrator of this mass killing in my hometown of Lewiston, Maine. For the good of my community, I will work with any colleague to get this done in the time that I have left in Congress.
Taking a strict stand, the U.S. has stopped issuing export licenses for most civilian firearms and ammunition for 90 days for all non-governmental users. The Commerce Department said this on Friday, citing national security and foreign policy interests. The Commerce Department did not provide further details for the pause, which also includes shotguns and optical sights. It, however, said an urgent review will assess the risk of firearms being diverted to entities or activities that promote regional instability, violate human rights, or fuel criminal activities. A U.S. judge has asked former President Donald Trump whether he wants to appear on television during his trial in the federal court. Trump has been charged of attempting to overturn his 2020 election defeat. The question comes after media organizations in 2 separate filings argued that the public has the right to see an unprecedented trial of a former U.S. president who is also the frontrunner for the 2024 Republican nomination. Residents of Acapulco are still coming to terms with one of the most forceful storms Mexico has experienced. As per the Mexican government, the record-breaking storm has claimed 27 lives and damage amounting to billions of dollars. People were seen carrying food, water, goods and boxes of necessities out of a wrecked supermarket and loading up cars. More than 8,000 armed forces and the members were sent to help clean up the stricken city. In Australia's Queensland, authorities on Saturday advised thousands of residents to flee as bushfires that have destroyed at least 30 homes persisted in endangering rural towns. More than 35 bushfires were burning on Saturday in Queensland. Australia faces a high-risk bushfire season after the onset of an El Nino weather event associated with extreme events such as wildfires, cyclones and droughts. Queensland Fire and Emergency Services issued an emergency bushfire warning on Saturday, urging residents to leave immediately. The months-long actors' strike has wreaked havoc on Hollywood. Now, the striking Hollywood actors will meet on Saturday for next round of talks with the studios. Hollywood's studios and streamers return to the bargaining table with SAG-AFTRA for their third round of meetings this week. Thousands are out of work, productions have been put on hold, and numerous industries have been affected due to the strike. Elon Musk's social media platform X, which is also formerly known as Twitter, rolled out 2 new subscription plans on Friday. A Premium Plus tier for users willing to pay for an ad-free experience was also included. The cost of this plan is priced about $16 per month and also includes all the tools and features offered by the platform. It will be available for users accessing the platform through a web browser for now. The Group of 7 trade ministers meeting will begin today in Osaka in Japan. India's Minister of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal will attend the 2-day-long meet. The minister will also have bilateral meetings with a few G7 countries, invitee countries, and also international organizations such as WTO on the sidelines of the outreach programs. Trade ministers of G7 member states hold an annual meeting with the aim to meet the current global challenges related to trade and investment and to set the course for a better future. Up next, we take a look at other stories making it to the headlines today from India. A fire broke out at the International Kullu Dussehra Festival in Himachal Pradesh. 2 people suffered injuries while dousing the fire and one of them was hospitalized. The incident took place at the Dussehra ground in front of the court complex. The fire has been brought under control. The week-long festival began on October 24th. A 19% increase is reported in mango exports during the first 5 months of the ongoing financial year. India has exported mangoes worth $47.98 million as compared to $40.33 million during the same period last year. India's mango exports to the US alone surged by 19%. Looking at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision for Act East policy and to improve relations between Northeast India and Southeast Asian countries, the 3-day Northeast India Festival started in Vietnam on Friday. The event aims to strengthen the ties between Vietnam and India. The monthly earnings of regular workers in India's rural areas grew sharply by 11.6% year-on-year, which is the fastest rate in at least 5 years. Now, this was stated in the latest periodic Labour Force Survey annual report. The unemployment rate in rural India from July 2022 to June 2023 was also the lowest in 5 years at 2.4%. The Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy's data also showed that India's rural unemployment rate dropped to a 12-month low of 6.2% in September this year. Also, the PLFS defines regular workers as persons who worked in others' farm or non-farm enterprises and received salary on a regular basis. In the Asian Para Games at Hangzhou in China, India's overall medal haul, in fact, has surged to a historic 111 medal mark, comprising of 29 golds, 31 silvers and 51 bronze medals. Now, this remarkable feat supersedes India's previous best of 72 medals, which was achieved in 2018 edition of the Asian Para Games in Indonesia. What makes this achievement so special is that India's para-athletes have pipped their compatriots in going past the 107 medal mark at the Asian Games. Dilip Gavit kick-started today's medal streak by helping India reach the coveted 3-figure mark. He secured gold in the men's T47 400 meters event with a time of 49.48 seconds. In the para-chess men's team of B1 category, the terrific trio of Ashwin, Darpan and Saundarya secured a spectacular gold medal. Meanwhile, India swept the podium in the men's chess B1 individual event. Darpan Irani brought home the gold with his middle game maneuvering. Saundarya Pradhan bagged silver, while Ashwin Makwana clinched bronze medal. In the PR3 mixed double sculls rowing event, the Indian duo of Narayan and Anita bagged silver, with the timing of 8 minutes 50.71 seconds. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has hailed the milestone and attributed the success to the exceptional talent, dedication and perseverance of the Indian athletes. In a social media post, the Prime Minister said, and I quote him, 100 medals at the Asian Para Games, a moment of unparalleled joy. This success is the result of the sheer talent, hard work and determination of our athletes. This remarkable milestone fills our hearts with immense pride. I extend my deepest appreciation and gratitude to our incredible athletes, coaches and the entire support system working with them. These triumphs inspire us all. They serve as a reminder that nothing is impossible for our youth. On that note of appreciation, we end this edition of DD India Live here, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and also Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.